Okay, welcome to the first iteration of Chicago's Best Ideas. I think the appropriate way to start is the great Dean Ann Perry is here. She's going to go out, but it's amazing the work she's done to put this place together, so maybe we could all thank her. I fooled her by making her stay for one minute. So I think you know from the poster the origin of the Chicago Best Ideas, but I always feel like we should say something for a minute. It started at the 100th anniversary of the law school, and it was like, what are the ideas that come out of Chicago? And then in the spirit of Chicago, the thought is, now mind you, no one has followed the plan except for me, because you can't give faculty instructions. But the idea is like, think of some great idea that came out of Chicago, and then come up with it, explain it to students if they don't know it already, and then do a modern take on it. And so that's what I'll do, and thank you. And the Chicago Best Ideas that I want to talk about today is nudge, which many of you have thought about. It's traced to Richard Thaler, who's over at Booth, and Cass Sunstein, who was here at the law school, who's in fact coming back to give a talk soon. And I think everybody knows what nudge theory is, so here's my plan for the day. I'm going to remind you what it is and then do some applications. And I'm not quite going to make fun of it, but I'm going to try to tie it into other things in law, especially the idea of carrots and sticks. And let's see how we can place nudges, carrots, and sticks in both the public sector and the private sector, and what will we learn about it, and so forth. Now, I'd like to say before I start, and I'll try to leave some minutes for questions, but in turn, the questions have to be short questions, because I want everybody to love the person that asked the questions and not roll their eyes at you. So if you're going to ask a question that's exciting, but make it a short question, and I'll make it a short answer if possible. I'd like the talk to finish with, when you become a law professor, you should know the ideal thing is you have a talk and you build up to some like joke or climax, and then you finish with some inspiring like aha moment. So I just want to warn you in advance, I don't have an aha moment here. There's no aha. It's going to be like, here are a few ways to think about it, and okay, like aren't we a confusing set of people? Like, here's what we do in our private life, here's what we do in our public life, so think about it. So it's not aha, it's more like, here's a way of thinking about it. So I think we're ready to go. Okay, nudges are generally defined as something you can do that's influence people's behavior, manipulate them if you want to make it negative. You can affect people's behavior at very low cost and outside of the normal sort of law and economics thing you give people incentives. So it's a little bit like I can nudge you to get you to do something in a way that's not quite rational, you might say. It's playing on some inner self that we have. So, if I put a nice picture on the wall, then you might behave a certain way. That would be sort of a nudge. And I'll give some examples as we go along of famous nudges and what we should make of them and so forth. Now, it's not quite that the nudge has to be irrational, but it has to change your behavior a little bit. Again, we'll see examples of this. So let's just try some examples, and I'll tie it to carrots and sticks right away. Imagine that the government, wants more people, say for energy reasons, to drive electric cars. They want people to move from gas to electricity. And so here's the plan. The government thinks it's a good social policy. More on that later on. What can the government do? So let's do carrots, nudges, and sticks to make sure we're all on the same page. Carrots, that's very common these days. A state or the federal government might give you a subsidy if you buy the electric car. You might get $2,000 off. It might be tied to your income, might not be. So that's a carrot, right? The government is giving you money, essentially, to buy the electric car. It could use a stick. It could raise the taxes on other cars, or it could raise the taxes on oil, on gas. That might make people move to electric cars. So there's a carrot, there's a stick. A penalty is the stick. The positive thing is the carrot. There are many ways to do this. It could also give the carrot or the stick to the producer. It could say to the car manufacturer, unless you have a certain percentage of your fleet be electric cars, then you owe more in taxes, or then there's a fine on you, or you have to do it or we kill you. Those are all like sticks. You can imprison. Oh, it's going to be a hard audience. I see. Okay, when I say a company and I say kill them, you're supposed to laugh, because you know that I love all companies. None of them could ever do anything wrong. So, okay, that's sort of the idea. Or there could be a young person who wants to buy a car, and we can kill her. Okay. No, you're not supposed to laugh at that. That's like that would be a very sad thing, but governments have been known to do that. Okay, but you could also imagine, here's a weak example that I'm starting with. You could also imagine a nudge. Like, what would the nudge be? I mean, it might be something like the government could provide stickers and put like, the national flag on electric cars. And then when people went to the showroom, there might be something in their brain that sees an American flag and sees the car, and it might some people might gravitate towards the electric car thinking, oh, it's sending me the subliminal message that it's good for the country, good for something, or other people will see it and feel good about it. Maybe they too will buy the electric car. It could even be the color of the car, although the manufacturer might want to do that. Again, more on that in a moment. So all of that is nudges. And of course, they're not just choices. Presumably, the government can use some combination of carrots, sticks, nudges to get people to do what the government thinks it wants to do. Okay, so that's setting up the vocabulary. Now let's move on a little bit. So conventionally, in fact, we have a Chicago book about this subject. Conventionally, carrots and sticks are thought as being substitutes for one another. And we should spend a few minutes on that. Like, how are they substitutes? And how does the government choose, how does law choose whether it wants to use a carrot or a stick? So maybe a good example is you want people to drive safely. We'd rather not have drunk driving, let's say. So how does the government do this? Well, one possibility, the common possibility, is a stick. They send out police officers. If they catch you drunk driving, there's a big penalty. It might be an even stronger stick. You might lose your license for a while. If you run into somebody or you're a repeat drunk driver, you might go to prison even. So these are all sticks, right? They fine you, they imprison you, they do whatever, and those are all sticks. It could also use carrots. This has been done in some parts of the world. It could be that they randomly stop drivers, and if you're not drunk, you get like a gift certificate to McDonald's. This was tried actually in Britain about wearing a seatbelt. What got the laugh? The McDonald's, the Britain, or the, I don't know. But it actually was tried in Britain to get people to wear seatbelts. They would stop people randomly. If you had a seatbelt on, they'd give you a little prize, $5, I think. Okay, and it kind of worked pretty well. When you think about it, it's not entirely crazy. It's not like they have to stop every car. But of course, they don't stop every car to give us tickets either if we're drunk driving. So those are both carrots and sticks. So how? And you could just say, well, for every carrot, there's a stick. I think that is a common thing we teach in the law school. I used to believe that too. I mean, it's sort of true. So whenever you see a stick, like, oh, don't kill me, that would be murder, you'll go to prison for a long time. You could imagine a carrot. It could be at the end of the year, if we have no evidence that you've killed anyone, we give you a break on your taxes. Like, that's imaginable. But just putting it that way makes you realize like how we choose between equivalent carrots and sticks. And the way we do it is we try to think, well, what's an easier method of enforcement? In the case of drunk driving, certainly murder. But in the case of drunk driving, it's easier to look around for the few drunk drivers than it is to look around and reward the 99% of the population that is not drunk driving. So usually they're carrots and sticks, and the government picks the one that seems easier to do. In some cases, it uses both. Like pollution, it used to use kinds of carrots, now it uses kind of sticks. If you're on a river with a lot of factories, it's not obvious which is easier. This is sort of the stuff of many areas of law. I won't bore you too much with it today, but I just want you to bear in mind the idea that for every carrot there's a stick, for every stick there's a carrot is useful, and then trying to think about why law picks one rather than the other. Judges, for example, are usually in the business of only being able to use sticks. We don't really give them the right to lower people's taxes, let's say, but they can fine people or put them in prison and so forth. On the other hand, private companies, as I'm going to get to in a minute, they don't really have sticks, like more or less. The private company, leaving aside insurance, which again I'll get to, private companies don't really have the ability to put you in prison or fine you. All they can do is like raise prices, lower prices, reward you in various ways. So there's a limit as to who can use carrots and sticks, but the legal system in general, I think it's fair to say, has carrots and sticks at its control. And now these authors have advanced the idea, which really is very, very old, that, sometimes you'd prefer to mix in a nudge. Something that's not so expensive. It's not a carrot. It's not so visceral, but it's also not a stick, but it's kind of a way of manipulating your thought process, getting you to do something that the government wants you to do that might be a little bit more sophisticated than a carrot or a stick. Okay. Now, let's compare, since I mentioned it, let's compare the private and the public sector for a minute. So, think about Coca-Cola. If they want you to drink more Coca-Cola, there are obvious carrots they can do. They can lower the price of Coca-Cola, and then maybe they're paying you, in a sense, compared to the old price of Coca-Cola. And they can also use nudges. In their case, the nudges are usually fairly expensive. They could, for example, hire some gorgeous singer to go to the Super Bowl and drink Coke or do an ad for Coke or something. They're trying to change your mindset to think, oh, if I drank Coke, I would also be a gorgeous singer that would appear on the Super Bowl, or cool people drink Coke, so I should drink Coke too. And that's what advertising is, right? Like, we like to think, we sophisticates like to think, oh, they could never change my preference by putting some stupid ad on the Super Bowl. But of course, as we know, they do change our preferences. Like, we do change our preferences based on these clever ads, and Coca-Cola spends a lot of time studying people like us and trying to figure out what sorts of nudges would make us buy more Coke or more of a certain type of Coke or whatever. Sometimes the nudges are expensive for Coca-Cola, like buying a Super Bowl ad. They must think that buying the ad is less expensive than lowering the price, for example. There are other things they could do. I mean, they can kind of nudge you and do other things that are expensive. For example, they could go to the store, as they do, and they could say, an interesting nudge is that people buy more of a product if it's on the shelf that it's about eye level. Okay, that's a kind of famous thing. And you might say, well, wait a minute, how do they know that? Well, it's easy to experiment. Like, what height should it be? There's a lot of studying of that. If you go look at the literature, I mean, it's crazy. I think in the case of soda, it's like 5'6". You should imagine a 5'6" person, put the Coke at a 5'6" height, and somehow that has more influence even on the 6'5" person. It's crazy. But we went to law school, not that kind of school that studies that thing, and I think you've all made the right choice. It's nuts. There are other products like sports equipment where the place to put it on the shelf is a little bit higher because it's as if the sport makes people think they want to be taller. It's really, I went to a conference about this once at Harvard. I've never been so bored in my entire life. It was crazy. But these people who did this were pretty convincing that they've done these experiments. There are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake and so forth. Okay, so the private company, as we know, they don't really have a stick at their hand, but they can pay you. They can experiment with you, they can advertise, they can pay the store. All these things are combinations of carrots and nudges. Again, the government doesn't have all these things at its control. The government has more of these things at the control. Notice, for those of you who are in a torts class now, or who have been in one and haven't forgotten it all, notice that a lot of these things have strange activity level effects. For example, a common thing might be to get, imagine that you're more likely to buy an electric car if the United States flag is pictured on the door. That could have a strange activity level effect that might be negative. It might be, it's so much fun to buy the electric car that then you drive the car more and then you kill people by driving your car more miles. So it might have this moral hazard problem, which is the kind of activity level effect, right? Everybody with me? You might drive more. So there are a lot of examples about this. Now, Coke is perfectly happy if they get you to buy more Coke. Well, that's what they're trying to do. It might be that there's also some moral hazard there. You'll drive more Coke. You'll stay awake later at night. You're more likely to make noise that disturbs your neighbors. Like, Coke doesn't care about any of those things. The government might spend some time caring about these moral hazards and negative activity level effects and so forth. Sometimes I just have to add this because some of you have had Professor Ben Shachar in class and he's obsessed with this idea. Sometimes the private market can do sticks through a third party, in most cases through insurance, a course that probably everybody should take. So for example, in his case, he has, I think it's a Tesla, he has some sort of modern car, let's say, I think it's a Tesla, and the Tesla will also sell you insurance as part of your buying the Tesla. And then through the fancy technology, as you're driving the Tesla, the technology is keeping track of how fast you drive compared to the speed limit, of how sharp your turns are, of how even my car, if I step on the brake too sharp when I could have, gone earlier, it'll record it, and then later on I can look at my driving score. It's very, very good, I'm proud to say. But the idea is it doesn't really influence me. It's fun to get a good score, but that's no big deal. On a Tesla, it's very impressive because it's sort of a stick and a carrot rolled into one. His cost of insurance changes every day with his driving. So as he makes safer stops and as he turns less wildly, it'll say to him, oh, your insurance cost just went down 4 cents. Like, come on, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? So that's like a carrot and a stick built into the Tesla through the Tesla selling you insurance. Again, it's a really clever combination of carrots, sticks, nudges, and all that sort of thing. All right, what about at home before we get back to this? And there's a little twist here. So what do parents use on their kids? It's kind of complicated when you think about it. There's not much written about this, or maybe nothing I've seen written about carrot, sticks, nudges for bringing up kids. And then we'll talk about history in a minute. But right now, carrots are in. Like most of you have probably, given that you made it here to law school, my guess is that your parents didn't even know what a stick was. They rewarded you for everything. Like you played soccer, you were the worst player on the team, they gave you an award, at the end. Like everything was an award. By the way, I'm joking. My experience with most law students is they'll say, oh, that was true of everybody else on the team. But me, my parents said, go home and do your homework or I'll kill you, or something like that. And I mean, there's something to it. Like the modern parent uses a mixture of carrots and sticks, but at least conventionally it's thought that there are many, many more carrots used now than there are sticks, with a little mix of nudges. Let me just say another minute or two about that. So the parents might say, if you get a good grade, we'll give you, a prize. That's obviously a carrot. In my own case, I didn't want to go to Disney World, but I said to my kids when they were very young, if you can do the multiplication tables just quickly, they were very young, so one kid had to do it up to 12 and the other kid up to, I can't remember, 79 or something. So if you can do the multiplication tables, I think it was up to 20. I mean, that's not so easy. 17 times 13, bang. You got to do it within 2 seconds or you don't go to Disney World. And it was extremely successful. Offering them the carrot of going to Disney World if they could do these multiplication tables. To this day, they thank me for it. They say, oh, my friends, they can't multiply 11 times 86. I mean, can you believe it? And I'll just be like, no, I can't believe it. They had bad parents. By the way, there's a trick in multiplying by 11, as some of you know, but let's leave that aside. If you don't know that, you had bad parents, I think. I'm not kidding. Okay, so parents can use carrots. They could also use sticks. They could say, look, you've got to do well on that calculus exam, or no vacation for you, even though the family normally goes on vacation. This is very unpopular these days. And look how the room got so silent at the thought of, oh my God, my parents punishing me for doing poorly on a calculus exam. But a lot of parents do use that. If you interrupt me at dinner, I slap you. That's a stick. Unknown to your generation, but very common in my generation. Very common in my generation. So presumably the parents know the kid pretty well and they've come up with some combination of carrots and sticks that work. Maybe they're equivalent. Maybe for every carrot there's a stick, for every stick there's a carrot. And over time we've learned. Now there is a lot of psychology evidence about this. The thought among psychologists is that, and there is some evidence for this, is that people respond very, very well to affirmation, as they call it, to positive signals. So that if the kid does well, studies hard for an exam and does well, and the parent immediately gives them a reward, hugs them and says, what do you want for dessert? That really makes the kid study hard the next day or the next month or whatever. On the other hand, if it's a stick, the evidence seems to be that you've really got to apply the stick immediately if it's to work at all. So the experiments are a little bit bizarre, but it's something like you get consent in advance, and then it's something like you sting the person if they get the question wrong, and they find, I just read this over this morning because I couldn't believe it, they find that if you sting them within 3 seconds, then they do better on the multiplication exam an hour later. Whereas if you sting them 11 minutes later, not only do you probably go to prison for child abuse, but actually they do no better on the exam. Like, I guess in those days, IRBs allowed these experiments, or there was no IRB or something. I personally think these are very worthwhile experiments, but okay, who knows? I mean, you want to improve. You might agree in advance, sure, go ahead and sting me if it'll make me better. Just think about yourselves. Like if we stung you and you knew that then I'll get like a 192 or whatever the great system is in our terrible grading system, a lot of people would say, slap me around and I'll get a 192. Like, that would be fine. Much better than if I said, oh, and if you study really hard and get a 192, I'll give you like an extra bagel at Coffee Mess. Like, that's not so impressive. But again, the evidence is there's a lot of psychology about this. Psychology. But these are not experiments that repeat very well, but there is some evidence that positive manipulation is better than negative. It's called the law of effect with an E, 2 E's, if you want to go look it up. Okay. Now, the literature suggests, kind of interesting, that, so I like this literature, so let's concentrate on it. The literature suggests that in the old days, there was more starvation in the world, so to speak, like people farmed, and, or way before that, our ancestors roamed around. And the suggestion is that the activities that people did in those old days, people understood very well what average or minimal human behavior was. So like, you'll go hunting with me, we'll walk, we'll go up the mountain, we'll lie down, we'll be quiet, and then maybe we'll catch the animal. And so it was more obvious to parents, or whatever you want to call the leader, it was more obvious like what to expect of the children. We'll go out in the field, we'll pick hay, or whatever one does with hay, and then we'll do, I know what one does with hay. And then, because if I didn't take that summer job, my parents hit me. So again, the thought was that the barrier, or whatever word you want to use, that the low-level behavior was well known to parents. And in fact, in that era, probably in large part because people didn't have excess money. They didn't really have money to give reward. They didn't go to Disney World with their kids who were better than average farmers or something. So the thought is that in the old days, parents used sticks much more than carrots, a combination of which they couldn't afford the carrots, and they knew what minimal behavior was, so they could figure out if their kid was underperforming or not, or the tribe could figure out if you were underperforming. And therefore, they could use sticks. They were sure. Whereas if you think about it, in modern times, again, I'm not making fun of this. I think there's a lot to it. In modern times, like, if your kid doesn't do well on the calculus exam, or doesn't, kick the goal the right way, like, you don't know. I mean, you don't know. Maybe your kid's not really capable of doing well on that. Like, these are different kinds of activities and different people. Like, I can't do a good painting, so it probably wasn't worthwhile to penalize me harshly if I didn't paint well. It wasn't going to cause me to paint well. I just was incapable of painting well. And the same might be true of people, with high-level math skills or something. So the thought is, you get the idea. The thought is that in a simpler society, people couldn't afford rewards, and also they knew what base activity level was. Now we're not so sure, like how good would you be at soccer if you put in very little effort, or how good would you be at calculus if you put in very little effort, and so we'll reward you for putting in more effort. Like, it's not so easy to judge, and maybe that's partly why our society has moved from sticks to rewards. It feels useless to like hit kids if for not doing something they just can't do. It'll kind of demoralize them and so forth. Okay, that might be expectations analysis and so forth. Okay. You notice that all these tools require some faith in the lawmaker, in the parents in the case I just described, and in the governments in the cases that we're getting to and that I started out with. So here I think what's interesting about it is that we think the parents know their children really well. So once you know your children well, then you probably know whether they can be better at math, whether they could have helped with hunting a little better. You've watched them. Whereas the government more or less needs to come up with rules that will treat many people at once. And the government has very little knowledge of, how hard I can work at teaching or how I could get better at teaching. It doesn't really know that. And it certainly doesn't know over 100 people how good they could be at math and what rewards to give and what penalties to give. And it's costly to give penalties because people might hate them, they might hate the government, they might hate each other. And it's also costly to give rewards. It costs money, And the government doesn't have an infinite amount of money. So it might be that the government is not so good at individualizing some rewards and benefits over there. It leaves those things to parents or whatever. But I think you have the general idea that the whole carrots and sticks thing works better, not to mention the nudges thing, works much better the better you know the person involved. But part of the trick of law is to try to think of the optimal rules, the right combination of these three tools. Given a large-scale society, the government might have information about the median person, but it doesn't have a lot of information about people in general or the extremes. And it needs to get a large percentage of people to be well-behaved. I mean, we could veer away from this if you want, but you could just think about problems we face, like getting parents to school their children well, or getting people not to commit armed robberies. Like, everybody's different, and it's not at all obvious what the right combination of carrots and sticks and nudges is in order to get people to do that. It's surely not the same for every person. And then we're suspicious if the judge punishes some people more than others, because the judge might have other biases. It's very hard for the judge to get information about the person's behavior afterwards. You know, in some ideal system, it might be that if I commit an armed robbery, the judge should know whether the best thing to do is to tell me, you know, we'll give you this reward if you don't commit an armed robbery within the next 2 years. Or another judge might know me better and might say, we're going to put you in prison if you commit another armed robbery. And another judge might say, you know, every time you don't commit an armed robbery today, we put a little sticker on your head. And then everybody will know that, you know, you'll be proud to be wearing the sticker. And more interestingly, it might have a third-party effect. Other people will then think, wow, the sticker reminds me. The sticker might say, no armed robbery today. I'm not being funny about this, because that's exactly what we do with, say, blood donations. You know, think about that. The government could reward people. It could pay you when you give a blood donation if it wants more blood of the type you have. Or, startlingly, it could penalize you if you don't give blood. People don't like that in our era, unless you're in the military or something, because you know, people think it's an intrusion on their bodies, they, you know, etc. I don't want to say blah, 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 because I guess it's important. But most people think that would be a bad idea. And after all, there are some people who have real health concerns or religious concerns about giving blood. So it'd be very hard for the government. Our government could never get away with, you must give blood, and if you don't give blood, you go to prison. Like, I don't think our government could do that, and it probably would be unwise also. So that's a good example of where the government can use a carrot or a stick. It's much more likely to use a carrot. It could pay you to give blood. Now, as we know, there are problems with paying people to give blood, because then people who shouldn't give blood, who know they could, you know, risk other people, might go give blood anyway because they need the money, and it's preying on their poorness and so forth. So it's a complicated problem. The government could test them first and then give them rewards. Some governments do that. But what almost all governments do is it tries to use a nudge, right? It gives them a little sticker. You give blood, they give you a little sticker, I gave blood today. And then you go around and you feel better about yourself, but yet more interesting, as I've said, other people see the sticker. By the way, the sticker could be regarded as a positive incentive. It could be regarded as a carrot, because you are signaling to the world what a great person you are, and you might value that. So, you know, that might be a carrot. I mean, the sticker is unimpressive to me as a nudge because it's a carrot. You feel better about it. But it's a nudge in the sense that other people on the street will see you with the sticker, and then they'll think, oh, that makes me think I should give blood also. And then they'll go give blood even if the place doesn't have any stickers left. So that's an interesting nudge, right? The government could choose to review, pay you, put you in jail if you don't give blood, or put a sticker on you that will encourage lots of people to give blood. Probably the right thing to do is what we do. The government starts out with the very, very low-cost nudge, going back to the original definition of nudges. It's very low cost. It's not very intrusive, like nobody feels like their body's been mutilated by other people wearing a sticker. And it's very cheap for the government. They just print, you know, stickers. Like, it's really low. It's a perfect nudge in a lot of ways. It might not work very well for most of us, but it's perfect. And places that really need blood badly, the government will spend some money advertising, or maybe they'll go around in some places and actually pay people to give blood, especially if they have a needed, unusual blood type. And our society doesn't like that very much, because it might be that people who need the money more are more likely to give blood. most people who go to the University of Chicago Law School think, great, like ask the poor person if they'd rather get money or not. Like, don't you rich people in law school think, oh no, that would be terrible to give people money to give blood because, oh, it's using people who don't have blood. Again, maybe, but also if you're a poor person, you know, you might want to get money to give blood. But I don't teach a course in that, so don't worry. But, you know, I think like with a lot of things, almost every carrot comes with this problem of thinking of underlying wealth distribution and other problems, but be careful, because the very people that you're feeling sorry for might be the people who most want the carrots. So it is a little complicated. And the same thing is true with sticks. So, like I would do almost anything not to go to prison. But other people apparently are like, well, prison, you know, I'll see my friends there, like not so bad. I mean, we have some evidence about this. So, you know, at a certain age, we're like, okay, you know, it'll make my community think better of me or something. And the same thing with the military. We can pay people to join the military. Other people go because it's a kind of puts them in good stead in their society. Other people can use a nudge. You put nice pictures of captains up there, and then people think, I want to be one of those people, and they'll go join the military. Again, everywhere we look, this interesting combination, and it all has these wealth distribution effects. But don't be too quick to be judgmental, because the very people you think you're protecting might be the people who want the carrot or the stick or so forth. So they're all kind of manipulation, might be the word for it. And of course, that's mostly the objection to nudges. People who don't like nudges are people who say, well, it's secret manipulation. You know, that's a bad thing. If Coca-Cola does it, this was a big thing in the 1950s. And the whole advertising business was, some of you may have read this famous book about this, but there was evidence that a lot of movies were made with subliminal information in it. So if you just flash information of Coca-Cola, when you're watching the movie, you don't realize that you've seen a picture of Coke. It's hidden in the picture, so to speak. And then there was a lot of evidence that people would watch the movie, they wouldn't realize that they had seen Coke commercials, and then they would go out and they would buy more Coca-Cola at the stand, and even buy more Coca-Cola within about a day at the grocery store. Okay, it's really kind of interesting. So if you're a super believer in the market, you might think, great. Like, you know, without having to watch a 15-second advertisement, I can watch Coca-Cola and maybe movies will be cheaper to make because Coca-Cola is paying for the movie. No, most of us don't think that way. We don't want to be misled about judges. So there was a lot of objection to the subliminal advertisement, and indeed it was made against the law. And there are ways they check up on movies to make sure they don't have any of these hidden messages in them. The non-hidden messages are perfectly okay, right? You can sell that the main character in the movie is drinking a Coca-Cola, and as we know, Coca-Cola pays for the product placement, as it's called. That seems to be fine with everybody, because now it's open. You see the Coca-Cola, you know on the Super Bowl or on the movie that the person's been paid to market Coca-Cola, and it makes us feel better because we have knowledge of it, so it seems like an open market over there. All right, shifting gears just a little bit, how do we evaluate these things? So a few ideas. One is that if you pay people to do something, think about Coca-Cola. You know, do we rather Coca-Cola use nudges or positive rewards or negative rewards or whatever? So I think it's a little bit confusing, because if Coca-Cola pays, say, to get better placement of its Coca-Cola in the store, then you are being bribed, sort of, right? You are getting this implicit message about Coca-Cola that you may not be aware of. You don't realize that you're responding to it because it's at 5'6" tall. On the other hand, it's sort of open, but more interestingly, from Coca-Cola's point of view, it's a market competition, because Pepsi is also trying to get its brand to be put up there at 5'6", and other companies are trying to do that. So it's a competitive market. And then the question is, well, how do we feel about that? Well, I'm a consumer. I like my Diet Coke. So I would prefer, in a way, the positive, you know, the carrots. Because the carrots in an open market means that when Pepsi competes with Coke and other brands, the way they get my business is by lowering the price. So I like the carrots. Like, it would be fine with me, or so I think, if they were not allowed to use nudges, because then the way they would compete would be by lowering the price, and I'd be happy to have a lower price for my product. In fact, I don't care about Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, but I'll make believe that I care. Okay, So in that case, there's competition. Everybody with me? There's competition among the forward-looking things, which I keep calling carrots. Let's call it price competition. It's very complicated there about who wins and who loses. Does Coke lose? Well, yes. They had to pay for the product placement or pay to give me a lower price, so they make less money. So you might, if you're very law and economics-y, you might think, well, who cares? I gain by paying a lower price for the Coke, but then the Coke shareholders lose because they make less money. So as we like to say in law and economics, it's a mere wealth transfer, like between me and the shareholders of Coca-Cola. I mean, that might be. It might be that there's no social gain or loss if one gains and one loses. Whereas, you see where I'm going, when the government does it, if the government pays me to have a safer car or a car that pollutes less, the government has no competitor. So we have to analyze it a little bit differently, that when the private market does it, the competition might drive the price down or the ads up or whatever it is. It might also drive the nudges. I've had trouble thinking about this. If the way Coca-Cola gets me to do something is by flashing a nice picture of Coca-Cola, well, Pepsi can also flash nice pictures. I'm not really sure what happens. Like, presumably my brain, there's some limit as to how I can take all these nudges into account. And maybe they offset each other, or maybe not. Maybe we are infinitely manipulable. You know, I don't know. It's really hard to know. It's easier to figure out in a market with prices. On the other hand, when the government does these things, the government has no direct competitors. So when the government lowers the price of something or uses a nudge, oh, wait a minute, I hope you're thinking already, that's not true. Because when the government uses prices, when the government pays me to buy an electric car, taxpayers are paying for it. And that's kind of an important message that I'm getting to. So now let's think about it that way. When the government uses a carrot, most often there is somebody paying for it. It's just, we don't kind of know who they are. They're what we call in public choice theory kind of like dispersed losers. There are all these people out there paying taxes. They don't know who they are in advance. They don't even know future tax policy. So they don't really know. I mean, probably the average rich person knows their tax rate will go up. But most of us really don't know whether we will be the ones paying for the government paying people to get an electric car. Now, environmental people would say, well, who cares? I just want there to be fewer gas-guzzling cars around, so I don't have to think about it. But that's not quite true, because if you take money away from people, some people then will use more, coal-burning stoves or whatever. Like, you can have a lot of profound effects by taking money from people in the tax system. But even if you don't think of it that way, someone is paying. So it's easier to think about Coke and Pepsi with somebody paying. But even when the government uses rewards, the taxpayers are paying for it. It's just that they don't know who they are. So the government, it's attractive for the government to give rewards. And most people, ignorant as they are of the tax system of the future, think, great. So if the government says, you go to jail or we'll hit you with a whip if you don't have an electric car, you have 3 cars in your family, one of them or more has to be electric. Most people would say, well then, subsidize me for buying the electric car. And everybody seems happy, not thinking about the taxes going up to pay for that electric car. Whereas if the government said, if you have 3 cars or more, you've really, got to have at least one be electric, or we put you in prison for a month. Most people would be outraged. They would think, that's really interfering with my liberty. Obviously, it would even be worse if the government whipped you. I just said whipped you to see if anybody would laugh, but no. People thought it was serious, like, that's okay. I think everybody sees what I mean, which is, in the private market, the winners and losers are obvious. In the government market, the winners and losers are not obvious. And if the government switches from positive to negative things, that is, from carrots to sticks, people are directly outraged. So people in general prefer carrots, I think, because they don't know where the cost is going. I think every carrot is a stick. Someone's paying for it. And that's not something we generally recognize. On the other hand, when the government imposes a stick, everybody immediately sees that there's a stick, and they get very upset by it. So that, this is true in the law school too. Like, if you want people, I don't know, imagine you want people to come on time to class. And you say, oh, if you come to class, I'll be so happy. Thank you so much for coming early. Because you came early to class, here are cookies for everyone. Everybody thinks you're like a lovely teacher. You're really great. Not thinking about, my tuition just went up, by 18 cents. Or in my case, because I privately paid for it, but therefore in the long run give less money to charity or something. They don't think about the effect of the positive payment. So they like positive payments. Whereas if I say, if you're 5 minutes less to class, your grade is docked by a point. Or if you're 5 minutes less, I call your parents and tell them how horrible a person you are. Like most people would think, oh my God, that's like an outrage. Can you believe Stanford University whips people when they come late to class? Imagining just hypothetically that people at Stanford go to class. That would really, it's really boggles the mind to imagine the whole stick. But if Stanford paid people for coming on time to class, everybody would go oh yeah, there you go. That's Stanford. At University of Chicago, we like going to classes. So again, this carrot stick thing I think is way more complicated than people usually think. So I'm just going to summarize the examples I just gave, which is that people seem to like carrots more than sticks, especially when it comes from the government. But I think they don't need to think about it in private industry because the carrots are offset one to the other. But in the case of the government, they think they like carrots better than sticks. But I think governments do that because people don't think 2 steps ahead, and they don't think about how is the carrot being funded. And if they thought about it, they might prefer some sticks more than carrots, or maybe some nudges, more on that in 1 second. But I think it's underestimated. And I think the people who advance nudges just think, oh, nudges are so great, you don't have to use carrots and sticks. But that's because they just think, well, one, they're too gross. What they really want is nudges along with carrots. So if we want people to save money for retirement so that the government doesn't have to rescue people, so to speak, later on, and the government could provide a carrot. They could lower your tax rates if you save a certain amount. That's sort of what some governments do. Savings plans, buying a house, whatever. Or they could use a stick. We penalize you if you haven't saved money. No one seems to like that. They'll say, well, some people can't afford to save money, even 10% of the money, or whatever. So people really resist the sticks. And some people are okay with nudges. But again, I want to point out, the carrots are sticks. Like when the government's giving you money to save, the money is coming from somebody. If it's lower tax rates, somebody else is paying for the military or the roads or whatever the government does. So they are making someone, maybe even you, but they're making your neighbor pay for you. It's just hidden. And I think for the same reason we don't like, Coke ads inside the film that we don't know about, we shouldn't like carrots when we don't really know who's paying for them. So I'll say it again with my 3 or 4 word phrase. Carrots are sticks, which is something people don't recognize very often. Okay. Where does this leave me before I pause for what I hope are many questions? It leaves me thinking, aside from what I just repeated about the carrots and the sticks, it leaves me thinking that, manipulation, which is another word for nudges, they're only good if we like the end product. So you have to really believe that what the government's trying to do is a good thing. If you think it's really good for us to all be a little healthier, and the government's got these clever nudges that will make us exercise more, eat less unhealthy food, or whatever it is, then we think, go for it. Government should just figure out, really think about the carrots and who's paying for them, or really think about the sticks and how people might suffer, and then maybe use nudges as a first step, because it doesn't really appear that there's a similar kind of loser out there. So if they can put pictures, or the president can exercise in the morning and show you how good it is to exercise, then most of us think, I think correctly, but that's really a good start if the government can do that and if it's successful. But you have to believe that the nudge is leading to a good thing. So just to ruin your day, there are examples, they're on Wikipedia if you don't believe me, but you might wonder who put them on Wikipedia. But there are 2, but I only put 1 there. There are examples on Wikipedia that are just astonishing. So for example, in more than one Hitler election, not just to put Hitler to power, but to get the people to approve of invading another country, Hitler had a vote. You could either vote the Hitler way or the anti-Hitler way. And the Hitler way, it sounds just crazy now, you had a ballot and there was like a big circle around the Hitler way. And then the anti-Hitler way just had a little circle. And gee, 80% of the population voted the Hitler way. Now, we don't really know. It's not a double-blind experiment and all that. But it appears that putting a really big circle around, like, this is the way to go over there. Similarly, in a Pinochet election in South America, it was really a Chilean election, really amazing. So there he's running, and again, he's on the left. Left-right is also, by the way, since we read left to right in both these languages, that's another example of a certain kind of nudge, because we're reading that way, so you want to be on the left rather than the right. As you might know, in some California elections, they vary the place that people are, whether you're top of the list, down the list, left, right. But let's assume left, right, so that's pretty clever. So Pinochet and Hitler put themselves on the left. And then Pinochet's motto, above his name, was a picture of the Chilean flag. And his opponent is over there on the right, same size circle or square, but I don't know, like some picture like a donkey or something, like above. I don't even remember the picture, although it's on Wikipedia. It's like some nothing, up there, like that, And 78% of the population voted for Pinochet, which was way more than what the polls had suggested just 1 week earlier. So again, it's thought there that the nudge was really powerful. Now, in both those cases, I think suddenly, we don't like nudges very much. Like, you've got to really have faith in the government that it's choosing the right outcome before you say you like the nudge. If it were more open, if it was a carrot or a stick, you might not like the outcome, but I think you'd have more faith that we could evaluate it and vote for the person. So if Pinochet said, if you vote for me, I'll give you $100, then people might pass laws against giving the money, or they might object to it, or they might think he was not genuinely elected. Like there, the reward, the carrot that is, seems a little bit more honest than the stick. And there might be a lot to be said for that. Now, we all think, unrelated point, we all think incorrectly, like, come on, like we cannot be manipulated. Come on, you're going to put like a flag above it, and then I'm going to vote for Trump, and like, no way. That's not going to have a big circle around Trump. That's just going to cause me to throw more darts at it, or something. But, apparently a lot of these nudges work, and they work in ways that we don't, notice. So again, I think a little bit of a problem with the nudges. The advantages are ones that I've already stressed. They're cheaper. There's not a hidden loser in the way there is with the forward money and all that. But there's a little bit of a problem in that everybody thinking, oh, I'm not motivated by these, so the nudges don't really affect me. Having said that, the same is true of carrots and sticks. Like when the government raises taxes to pay for something, it's quite open, but you've got to have a lot of faith that the government knows what it's doing. After all, they have this power to tax you and then take the money and hire the right person or the wrong person to build the road. Again, a government that can use carrots is a dangerous thing unless you think the government's doing a good job. So that itself is not something that makes me like or dislike nudges compared to carrots, because you've got to have faith that the government is choosing the right project. And similarly, of course, with sticks, if the government is going to do the monetary equivalent of whipping you, like taxing you or forbidding you to go to law school unless you have a license, or forbidding you from being a doctor unless you take the following 11 tests that are only given in one state on a day that you don't like, or whatever. All those things are kind of a little bit of a stick, raising your costs of doing things. Again, you have to have some belief that the government is doing a good job. So on that front, I think we just need to recognize that any which way the government does these things, they can all be terrible, or at least not so good, unless the government is aiming at the right things. The only disadvantage nudges have is that people are less inclined to think about whether it's a good thing or not, and even less so if it's done with a carrot, because as I've now said twice before, if the government pays you to do something and the thing looks reasonable, everybody's excited. Oh, I'm getting paid. I don't have to take the money if I don't want it. But again, they're not thinking about who is paying for it, when, and where. So that's enough of talking. And now I would love it if there were some thoughtful questions. So following the Pinochet example, I'm going to start on the left and move to the right. Any, please.
Considering your example,
I'll repeat the questions if they're good questions.
you compared government carrots and sticks versus like private sector, and said there's a countervailing stick to every carrot in the private sector, but not necessarily with the government. Wouldn't the price, like, isn't it fairly obvious that, if there's a subsidy, the people paying for it is just everybody not receiving that subsidy in the same way there's the wealth transfer from the Coca-Cola shareholders, there's wealth transfer from the non-EV drivers to the EV drivers.
Okay, so first of all, let me just make sure I understood. The question was, is there really a difference between the public and private sector? Because after all, as I've explained, even when Coca-Cola gives you a reward, they're taking some money from the shareholders and so forth. So, did I get the question right?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I'm not positive that's what I said. I tried to say that in the government case, I think there's a stronger case for every carrot having a corresponding stick and backwards and forwards, although I tried to show there might be exceptions in terms of enforcement costs or other things, and that hidden from us was that the carrot had a cost. Okay, that's certainly the point over there. I thought I said in the private sector, the private market doesn't usually have the power to impose sticks. They don't have the right to put you in jail and tax you, so they can only use nudges and carrots, and that's an interesting difference. Another way to think about it is, you'd expect the government to use fewer nudges because the government has two other sources of power. It can use carrots, it can use sticks. Therefore, nudges might work, but it doesn't need them as much. Whereas the private sector only has carrots, can't use sticks. Therefore, other things equal, you'd expect it to use nudges more. More advertising, if you will. Okay, that's kind of interesting. On the other hand, I like that point. On the other hand, there are reasons to expect the government to use nudges more than we might otherwise think, because they want to give you a reward. Well, they got to convince people to pay more taxes. They want to give you a stick. People jump up and down like crazy. Even though they're allowed to do it, people really object when the government uses a stick. So that might make the government move towards nudges. So it's a close call. I think we should expect more nudges in the private sector, but I was trying to be fair and show that it's in both. So the only thing that I have in response to your question is, no, I didn't mean that Coca-Cola is a wash, because it's true that Coca-Cola shareholders pay for the lower price, but Coca-Cola wouldn't do it unless they thought it was overall profitable. So Coca-Cola, if well run, must think, oh, the shareholders are really better off if we lower the price of Coke this month, because we'll sell so much more Coke that will make more money, and that will inure to the profit of the shareholders. It's only that when Coca-Cola is thinking about prices, they are also thinking about the value of the nudge. So they might rather spend the money on putting the person in the Super Bowl with a nice picture or something. That might be better. But again, they're making that decision in order to benefit the shareholders. So I think we should keep it in mind. I just wanted to show that just like in the government case, there's a hidden message. They give you a reward, they give you a carrot, and people don't know who will be taxed later on. In Coca-Cola case, everybody can see the cost of the carrot because share prices will rise and fall. And usually they'll rise because Coca-Cola has every incentive to make good decisions about its carrots. Was that responsive?
Yes.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, you mentioned briefly about the distribution of stickers for like blood donations and stuff like that. Are you familiar with any research on the distribution of I voted stickers in regions that a party in power might want more people voting in?
Yeah, it's a big topic in our law school, and we used to have somebody who wrote about this, who specialized in it, but we stickered him away, I guess might be the right expression. I really had to think twice to make sure I wasn't saying anything secretly offensive or sexual there, but I decided stickered was a good enough joke. Yeah. So again, voting is an interesting example. I'm going to only half answer your question because we have this norm about not paying people to vote. Some countries use sticks, though. They require you to vote, or there's a small fine. In Australia, famously, I don't know what it is now, something like $30 or $25 fine if you don't vote. It does raise the number of voters. It's a little sloppy because a lot of people that vote write, a curse word in the ballot evidence. By the way, amazingly, there are a couple of you that took public choice from me last year, so you know this. Amazingly, it's as if they all agree on which, as you call it, cuss word to put. So, I can't remember the percentage. I think 6% of the voters in Australia don't really vote. They go to vote so as not to be fined, and then the ballot. And of those people, 90% write the F word. That is really a well-organized population. if only we could get people to agree on anything, like that. That would really be amazing. So there are countries that try carrots and sticks. We are a little offended by the carrots, again, because other people pay for it. It's a little bit inefficient. It would be like paying people to drive not drunk. Like, most people will vote even if they don't get paid for it. So it's a lot of money, a lot of figuring out who voted, then giving them money. It just doesn't really seem efficient. So we don't like paying people to vote for one candidate rather than another. And paying people to vote in general just seems like a bad investment of effort. So it doesn't really work that well. And then there are other things, like you could put stickers on people when they vote. I think we do that here. Is that right? I think we do that here. You could applaud them when they come out of the voting booth. I mean, I think it's fun to vote, so, maybe there's that. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. And I love voting, but, and you could see the but coming, the evidence, when you ask me if there's studies of it, what the evidence really shows is, this is going to be the most unpopular thing I've said in a week. The evidence seems to be, it really doesn't matter. Our own dean wrote about this when he was a junior faculty member. If you try to study people who don't vote, in his case, you try to study people who were not allowed to vote in Florida because they were in prison, and then you ask them who they would have voted for, or even people who are out of prison but were not allowed to vote because of their prior record. It's very, very, very hard to find an election that would have gone the other way if all those people had voted. That surprises most people, because we like to think, maybe because we live in Illinois or Chicago, we like to think, if only the people who come out of prison could vote, like Democrats would get all the votes. It's just not true. Like, actually, they seem to vote in about the same proportions as their families back home or even their neighbors back home. Like, knowing the zip code is a much better predictor than anything else. So it's really confusing. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to vote. I don't really have that strong an opinion about that. Like, it's fine. In fact, I don't really see why any politician objects to it, because it doesn't change any election, apparently, if you can believe the literature. And Dean Miles is a very, very careful researcher of empirical method. So I have a lot of confidence in that study. So it's really weird, like what we encourage, what we don't encourage. Giving people stickers does not appear to change voting outcomes. I only know about a Virginia study that does that, so maybe you know more, but you get the general idea. I'm like skeptical that any of this has an effect. I think it's more you're advertising yourself. What a great guy I am that I voted. Okay. Yeah.
So my question is about nudges. You talked about how nudges are manipulative in a sense, but I think that there are some nudges that seem to simply provide people with more information.
Sure.
And maybe they do that with a purpose in mind, but they're still providing people with information. For example, I think that they considered, instead of telling you your fuel miles per gallon, instead they would tell you your fuel cost.
Right.
Because there's a big difference between 10 and 12, but
Okay.
there's not a very big difference between 50 and 60. But people don't intuit that. So is that still manipulative?
Right. Well, sure. I mean, I agree completely. A lot of nudges, not to mention the other things, they are providing information. So, I don't know, like, does it really matter whether we call it a nudge or information provision or whatever it is? I don't know. Does it matter to you? It doesn't really matter to me. Like, almost every nudge, other than the secret ones, also provide information. In fact, if you want to be super Chicagoish, you could say, even Hitler putting a big circle around his name provided information. Here's a guy that tries to manipulate you. Really good. I got extra information about Hitler. Now I'm not going to vote for him. Or I got information that the guy's really good at manipulating people. That's the kind of leader I want. I mean, all these things can be sold as providing information, and information can be good. Again, the underlying thing was really my final point. It all depends on whether you think the ultimate goal of the government is a good goal or a bad goal, whether it's information providing or not. We have time for one more question, and I feel bad that I'm not getting to the right side of the room, but do you still have your hand up? Only if you still have your hand up.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I had a question about so you mentioned that relative to the consumer, corporations can't really use sticks. I'm wondering it seems like relative to the worker though, corporations definitely can use like a combination of carrots and sticks. And so I'm thinking specifically about how most states have at-will employment. So as long as your employer isn't terminating you for a protected characteristic, if you
Right.
express a political view that they
Again, I don't know that it really matters whether we call it a stick or not. To me, it's not a stick, as you might know from knowing me a little bit, because it's the employee also has a stick. The employee can quit. If I said, oh, in some states, the employee quits if they don't like the employer's politics, boy, that's a stick. I think you would say, whoa, that's not a stick. That's like your right to quit work. Or, so, I think we need to be, again, stick's not a bad word in my book. So I think I'll just be careful thinking about it as a stick. I mean, you can go at a job with an employer you like. Is that a carrot? Maybe. I mean, you're benefiting yourself as well as the employer. You can quit from a job you don't like. Now, again, if you have a starving family back home, maybe you can't do that, but you could have decided early on. Maybe you don't want an employer that switches. If I go to a law firm that says, we do tons of public interest, we love it, we love it, we love it, and the day after I go there, the law firm says, yeah, this pro bono stuff, like, forget it. Well, then I might feel like that was consumer fraud or something else. I'm not sure I'd call it a stick, but I'm okay with it. If you want to call it a stick, that's fine with me, as long as you recognize that the employee also has a stick then. I feel bad about the right side of the room, so I'm going to take one question from the right side, and then we're going to stop. And I don't know. I'd rather take it from somebody I've never met before. So if I've never met you, could you raise your hand? Oh, I've met you. I've had coffee with you and everything. But I haven't seen you in a while, so you get to ask. Is it a good, short question?
Yes. So
We're timing you.
when a teacher gives out cookies to the people who come early, one way you could look at that is saying, there's an opportunity cost in everyone who comes late, that they missed out on the cookie. Would you consider that more of a nudge? Would you consider that a stick? And would you think the same about when people publicize winners of the lottery?
Well, winner of the lottery is so confusing. I'm going to leave that aside, because winner of the lottery, you might think, I'm sure that if I won the lottery, people who are very, Eric Posner would say, I hear you won $1 billion. You're an idiot for playing the lottery. I don't know. Like, is that a carrot or is that a stick? I'm really not sure. I'm pretty sure I would say to him, my family has another $1 billion. Of course, I didn't buy the lottery ticket. Someone, at Stanford gave it to me as a gift. I mean, I don't know what I would say. So I'm going to leave that one aside. That's very complicated. In the case of the cookies, I don't know. And why does it matter what I call it? It's a little bit like the previous question, like Hannah's question. Why does it matter?
I guess, do we try to consider the people who benefit from it, or do we consider the people who missed out on it?
Oh, I see. Well, again, every carrot's a stick. So it fits the theme. If you ever become a law professor, let me just give you some advice, which is, so you give out the cookies, and then somebody comes late, and then the way to be a well-liked law professor is give them a cookie anyway. Again, like, what? Like, it's sort of like it's a joke within the group. Like, he gave us a cookie to encourage us, but all he was trying to show us was that he really values that we didn't disturb the group by coming early, and then he was kind of a nice guy, not something I suffer from often, by giving the person a cookie. So that's the right strategy. Again, I don't know whether that's a carrot or a stick. It's a funny combination. What it really is a nudge. I'm nudging everybody into thinking that I'm a nice person by giving them cookies, and then also giving the cookie to the person who comes late and slams the door and ruins everyone's education. So I guess I should say every positive signal has a corresponding stick, and also maybe has embedded within it a nudge. Like, that's kind of interesting. Just like buying something nudges you to think, I buy a Lexus, it's also a nudge. It sends a signal about there's no end to it. That's really was the overlying message, that these are all connected. So thank you very much. We're right on time. Don't forget to go to class.